Welcome to US Rugby Happy Hour Live. Interviews with the biggest names in American rugby.
The New England Free Jacks, Major League Rugby champions. One-on-one to score.
Here are your hosts, Bill Baker and that other guy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of US Rugby Happy Hour Live. I'm that other guy, John Fitzpatrick. Again, this week, Bill is out. He can't make it. Don't worry, everything is fine. He's still around behind the scenes, producing, directing, yelling in my ear, telling me all the things I'm doing wrong. But Bill will be back in the next couple of weeks. So, like last week, we have a guest host. Last week, it was Wendy Young from your Scrum Half Connection. This week, my guest host, a lot of folks around MLR, and particularly New England Free Jacks fans, recognize this guy, Thomas Grant, otherwise known as Wheels. And I'm very excited for Wheels to come on because we're going to be interviewing USA Men's Eagles head coach Scott Lawrence as well. But like we always do for every single show, we have to have an intro jingle song. So please, Bill, cue it up, roll the intro jingle for Wheels.
Apparently Fitzy can't do it himself, so we have a guest host in for Bill. Maybe Bill doesn't trust him.
Shh, don't spread rumors.
Rumors! Filling in for Bill tonight, New England Free Jacks, Director of Community and Entertainment, and MLR Sideline reporter, Thomas Wheelsy Grant's.
Wow, that is probably the best thing I've heard in a long time. That's brilliant. Fitzy, great to see you, mate. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, really pumped for this interview. I know we've had Wendy on last week, so some big shoes to fill in the guest hosting department. But yeah, look, that intro and that jingle's got me pumped up. So yeah, can't wait, mate.
Hey, we're already off to a good start because last week, I don't know if you caught it, but the first minute of last week, it was complete silence. You could just hear me yapping, but there was no audio coming out. I think Bill sabotaged it on purpose, but I gotta say, so the great thing about the intro jingles is that I never hear it before they come out. So Bill always surprises me with it. So the first two lyrics of your intro jingle were hilarious, very funny, Bill. Well done. But Wheels, man, I'm glad you're the guest host this week. We've got a lot to talk about. But first, before we get into our interview with head coach Scott Lawrence, for those who don't know you or haven't seen you either on the Rugby Network or on ESPN Plus doing MLR sideline games and New England Free Jacks, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, mate. Well, from the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand, Aotearoa, but have been here in America for 3.5 years now. So time's gone super fast. And I was a rugby mad kid growing up, just like a lot of people are here in America. And I quickly found that I wouldn't be adding too much value on the field due to my attacking and defensive abilities. So, yeah, found a bit more love in the game off the field and the management and administration coaching space. And, yeah, love talking about the game as well and finding out those unique stories in the rugby world. So, yeah, fortunate with the Free Jacks. We've had an awesome few years. And, yeah, USA Rugby is on a really awesome upwards trajectory. And to be a part of that whole mission and growing the game here in America is honestly such a special thing to be a part of. So, yeah, being on the mic sideline, I guess, is just a bit of an added perk and a privilege to the role. But yeah, really doing it for the love of the game and the people out there you meet. So, yeah, Scott Lawrence is one of those and can't wait to chat to him.
So you've been in the US going on 4 years, almost 5. So you almost qualify for the Men's Eagle based on residency. So we'll have to ask Scott if yes, he'll consider you for the larger player pool. Because I mean, like, we could always use another guy, right?
Yeah, it was one of the topics I was going to bring up tonight if we have time, if producer Bill allows it. But I know that may be bottom of the list of questions. But we'll see if we get to it.
One of the things we'll talk about, certainly a couple of days ago in Washington, D.C., I happened to be in attendance for it, but USA Rugby, they announced their 2025 match series, both for the USA Men's and Women's Eagles, basically just outlining international matches, starting with USA Women's Eagles in April and then going through July, culminating in that awesome doubleheader, which will be at Audi Field in Washington, D.C., USA taking on England, men, and then the U.S. women taking on Fiji. I mean, Last July, USA men played Scotland. The crowd, it was a great turnout for the crowd there in Audi Field on a hot, sweltering day there, DC in July. But Wheels, we'll get to Scott Lawrence because I know we got a bunch of questions. But before we do that, one last thing here, listeners, please like, follow, or subscribe to the show. Feel free to leave a comment. We'll try and feature some of those here on the show to ask Scott. Of course, follow us on social media and visit eagleoverseas.com, rugbymorning.com, and anywhere you can find Wheels online. Wheels, real quick, what's your social handle so everyone can hear?
Yeah, pretty simple. At Wheels Grant. There you go. So name's actually Thomas, but for some reason it's become Wheels over the past 23 years. 24 years.
Awesome.
That's good.
Good stuff. All right, Wheels, let's get to our main guest here. We're going to bring on USA Men's Eagles head coach Scott Lawrence. But first, Scott, you know it's coming. Here comes the intro jingle. Roll it.
Our guest tonight, leading our boys into the fight.
The man's message is not 2, not 1, but 0 G's. 10 and 9. Moonshot. Meaningful match minutes. To the moon. To the moon. To the moon. Please welcome USA Rugby men's head coach, Scott Lawrence.
Scott, welcome to the show. How did you like your intro jingle?
The key to good religion and messaging is repetition. So obviously something I've been saying is sticking. So it's coming out of the songs now. So I appreciate that. Wish you guys would send me a copy of that. I'll just put that on wherever I can, maybe for college coaches and things. That was good. Well done.
Well, so Scott, I mean, you kind of look like you could be like a WWE wrestler. So if you were this is completely random. We're already going off script here, but we might as well go with it. If you were a WWE wrestler, what would your intro song be, your walkout song be for the main event? We got to know now.
Oh, I'd go completely off script because I think the world's a little bit crazy right now. So there's this song that I really like that says, I think we all need Jesus. And, it's just like what used to be wrong is now right. And I think we all just need Jesus. So that's a, big part of what I listen to. It makes the neighbors a little crazy is listening to Christian music while I work out in the garage. But I know it's not very exciting, but maybe we could convert somebody in the crowd. You never know.
There you go. That's perfect. Yeah. I guess if it goes with WWE, then you pick up a chair and slam the guy in the head. But a little bit of a different sport, rugby here. Why don't we get back to talking about rugby here? As we mentioned just a few moments ago, a big event in DC this week announcing the doubleheader, both the men's and women's Eagles, more matches. I think that's kind of the big thing. The big message that I've got from USA Rugby, the head honchos, is just making sure there are more matches on the schedule for both the men's and women's Eagles. One, for players to play more, but two, just to have a calendar of events and an inventory to be able to sell the assets, to market it, to make sure that folks in and around the U.S., whether you're a rugby fan or not, know that their matches are coming up. Right? So we're all very excited about that. The question I want to get to here is, notice that two of the games are going to be in Charlotte, Netherlands on July 5th, Spain on July 12th. Both those games taking place in American Legion Stadium. Scott, I believe right there in your current hometown. Are you in Charlotte or are you still in Atlanta area?
I'm still in Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay. Because my question was, how did you pull those strings to get those two matches there in Charlotte? Did you have any say in that?
Charlotte's kind of become the default hub of the men's 15s. It's so we've got infrastructure there. We've got good partners in U.S. Performance Center that provides us with resources. And so it made sense for us to just leverage that infrastructure a bit more for some home test matches. I think that Memorial Stadium is a really nice size for the Eagles for those types of games. 10,000 is about right. Less to travel and hopefully, there's already a few guys, Sam Gala and Toby Fricker and Connor and Mitch and Jake and Alex that are there. So they don't have to travel too far for a test match, which is also another benefit.
And Scott, you mentioned those anthem players, Fricker and Mitch Wilson and the likes. Is it important for those guys to have, I guess, a familiar environment? When they enter that test arena, they've got that MLR environment there with anthem, and then is it important for them to have that, I guess, familiarity around facilities and environment? Do you think that helps a player?
I think it. I think it can be transparent to the players, so it helps the operational staff that provides the experience for the players, and if they know where to find things and how quickly to move and what traffic to avoid and where to get the caterer and things like that, like it puts time back into the rugby when you're not worried about the logistics, especially as a head coach. You can say, yep, I got that. That's easy. I'm not spending less time on that. I can start focusing more on my time into the tactical and technical parts of the game.
So Scott, with these tests in July here, obviously, you don't go into matches hoping just to be competitive, right? You want to go in to win. With that said, would a close game, win or lose against England, and now England, they may have a few players off, on tour, the British and Irish Lions tour, but would a competitive match against England, what would that mean to the team's success going into what's going to be a very important PNC later at the end of the summer, beginning of September?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go on the outcome of it. I would say if the team grows from Spain the week before, and we're in a position where we're looking at the right combinations that are going to take us into the PNC, which starts in August, and ultimately World Cup qualification, that for me is success. I mean, I think we walked away from last July series looking at the Scotland game and went, the score probably could have been different, a little bit different. But we took a lot of positives from that because we grew from that, from the previous 2 weeks that we had together. And so, you kind of got to ignore the score for a second and really just keep in mind the mission. And the mission is to qualify for the World Cup this year.
And we speak about the PNC, Scott, that's later this year. And, the Eagles had their first taste of that last year. How important are the lessons that you took from last year's campaign into this year's campaign? Obviously, you've got 3 important matches before then, but how do you shape up your campaign around that PNC with these 3 matches?
I think you learn a lot when you start to spend extended time together in the international environment. Is probably around people and environment management. We're all human and we love our families and we miss our families, and you start to go away for 5 weeks and we have to do those things right. I think that's first and foremost is we learned some things that we'll do better this year around that. Being in the United States will make a huge difference in that, and because we can start to build time into the schedule for those connections and things to take place. So I think that's one. I think actually some things that we did well, you kind of, if you did a 1, 2, 3 on it, one, what did we do well was we really built the robustness and we managed the athletes really well in our athlete performance space with Alex Ross and in the lead. And we found what worked for us that we needed to build in November. It's like, you have to fix something, but that it takes probably a month to do. And ultimately we did that. And we got those results in November from that. So I think that's what we did well. I think the things we'll work on is kind of managing that connection back home, which will be easier when we're not on a 12 to 14 hour time change or on a maybe 1 to 3 hour time change. But we'll do those things, and we'll build on a couple of those things around the athlete performance that we had last year.
And around those athletes, Scott, obviously a lot of them are applying their trade for Anthem this year, and it's been incredible to see their improvements throughout this MLR season. With such a tight turnaround between MLR to this test window, how do you ensure those connections and I guess consistency stay within that Eagles squad when I guess a lot of it still has to be virtual in some respects?
you do a lot of virtual work, and then you trust the leadership and experienced guys and give them the ability to connect in small groups with new players into the squad prior to the actual assembly itself. I think that's massively important for us to do. We do a lot of things virtually, as you said, a lot of things around performance improvements, things that we can do around performance habits and psychology. We do a lot of things to connect in that way. I think there is the opportunity for us to look at a staged build up to July. Players that will play in the MLR final will come late. They'll be there with 5 days to get ready for the first test match. And I do think because of the schedule, there's an opportunity to start bringing players, at least connecting them a week or two in advance as their seasons finish throughout the MLR. We know the Prem final and the Pro D2 will be done by June 14th over on the other side of the ocean as well. So there's some opportunities to do some things. But ultimately, you're going to watch a group that knows each other come back together again. It's going to be a bit of a family reunion for 2 to 3 weeks to build that cohesion again. And then we want to put it on the field for PNC.
Awesome.
Yeah, Scott, for that July window there, those 3 test matches, from a fan perspective, could we anticipate some more players earning their first caps, or is it using that July window to kind of solidify, okay, these are the 23 guys we want primed for PNC time?
Yeah, I don't think we'll do a whole lot of tinkering, but I do think that there will be players, if they continue their form through round 5 that they have so far, will push their way into the squad. Inevitably, that will happen, and we will pick on form. And you have to be aware of cohesion. It's a pretty normal number last year that about every assembly, if you went back and looked, we changed about 25% of the squad, the actual turning squad every time. And that was to look at players, but that naturally happens through form, injury, attrition, so you'll have your core and then you'll be bringing 25% in that'll just play their way in through the course of the year.
Mm. Yeah, and speaking of the PNC, so you mentioned, right, the matches starting in August, going through September, Canada, Japan in pool play. I don't think we've had announcements yet, but it sounds like we're going to have a fixture or two on American soil this year. Is that the case?
Yeah, we will. So we'll go to Canada for the first game of the PNC, and then we'll be at home to Japan, and then the PNC playoffs will happen from there.
Yeah, and those are taking place in American soil. Is that in Japan?
No, they'll all be here from our home game in Japan to the playoffs. They'll be all in on home soil.
Got it. Right. So as we look to qualifying for Rugby World Cup 27, of course, Japan and Fiji have already qualified. So you've got four teams competing for 3 spots, right? USA, Canada, Samoa, and Tonga. Yeah. It's going to be a very fun and entertaining, nerve-wracking experience. But this is what we want. This is what we want. Of course, the 4th team that doesn't make it out will have to go to, I hate to say it, but the dreaded final qualification tournament.
Yeah.
So Scott, if you had a bet on one team to make it through, are we betting on the USA Men's Eagles here?
You have to, right? It's what wakes me up in the morning, is visualizing that happening. And we spend a lot of time doing that. But I'll give you a little teaser maybe around the PNC. Yeah. So if you think about a movie star drinking Coors Light, listening to jazz.
Okay.
Brilliant.
All right. So think about that.
Okay. My brain will take the next 40 minutes to work that out. So
yeah, you might figure out the locations for those games.
That's brilliant. And Scott, speaking of those opponents that you're going to play, obviously, you've got to keep a lot of your focus on Major League Rugby How much work are you putting into, I guess, scouting those international opposition players at the moment? Do you watch a lot of Super Rugby Pacific or other competitions around the world just to keep your lenses on those various players?
Yeah, so I think we've got a healthy group of Canadian players that we get to see every week, and so that's part of it. It's a little tougher to tell. You can pretty much peg the Drua, to start to look at Fiji a little bit. I think more generally at this time of the year, what we look at is what are the trends that are happening in the different parts of the world. We're seeing a clear separation, again, in my opinion, between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere styles of play. If you look between the Six Nations, in which we're looking at the way England's playing, and you're watching Super Rugby, in the way that they're playing, and I think you're seeing some similarities, but there's some definite differences in the way they're approaching the game. So you don't always know who's going to be picked for Samoa or Tonga. Their playing base is so broad. They play in so many competitions around the world. So we don't watch them individually too much. We just kind of watch the trends, so to speak, on those things.
Scott, quickly, just maybe from like a coach's perspective, and not revealing too much on how you think about the game, but you mentioned we're seeing differences, and I think some of us can pick up on the differences between North American rugby, the style, and South American rugby. But from your point of view, can you elaborate on some of those differences that you're seeing?
Well, I think probably because of the weather and the nature of the teams. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of unstructured moments. So the kick is the start of an attack in the Northern Hemisphere games in the Six Nations. I think that's been very prevalent. Tons of scraps and turnovers off of those kicks, and then the ability to clear the ball out of the area and put it into a second receiver's hands and make run kick decisions from there. So Northern Hemisphere still comes down to physicality, winning the upfront battle and set piece. That's always there as well. I think what I've seen in Super Rugby is in the coaching staffs. You're seeing a number of senior coaches come back into Super Rugby. So there was a lot of really young coaches, and now the coaching staffs have now gone back to older, more experienced coaches. And the real focus on skill execution has come back into Super Rugby trainings. Wasn't there as much before. When you talk to some of the Super Rugby coaches and things now, they're getting that back, and it's being evident in their play. And then you're seeing them get to the middle of the field with 3 layers of attack with 7 to 8 player shots more often in Super Rugby than you do in the Northern Hemisphere so far. Just really heavy kind of league influence on making midfield ruck defenses make decisions. So those are just a couple off the top of my head things that are going on.
And Scott, specifically speaking here about MLR and examining the style of play and the gameplay from this year's, I guess, opening 5 rounds, has there been any particular part of the game that's really impressed you compared to previous years? And, I think we've seen the level of quality of play, gone up over the years, but is there anything that's really stuck out for you?
I think the ability for teams to connect on 2 or more pass plays, so 3 pass plays, I think has just shown the increase in skill execution within the league. There's always a lot of turnover in rosters. That's normal. So when you still get that in the early rounds, it just says the players are improving in what they're doing. So I think that's quite good. I mean, definitely some high scoring games. It makes me a little queasy on the defensive side, but that we've got some work to do there. But some exciting stuff and some really good connection play. And I think the teams that are continuing to get their timing right and their speed of set right, which is improving the speed of the game, are doing quite well this far into the competition. And it's a real change in thought from Probably the league was very gain line focused before, where now it's more position and speed of ball focused. And I think that's really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, on that note, have you seen those law trials, in your opinion, have a real positive impact on the game so far since they've been introduced and increasing that speed of play?
I don't know if the law trials themselves have increased that part of the game. I think you see some variations in what's happening around. Most of them are resulting in free kicks, and I think there's been a general consensus that lineouts are the primary platform for scoring if you look statistically. And so, some of the things are replacing scrums with lineouts. Probably give some attacking opportunities there. I know that's a big one for the Free Jacks, a very big place that they, attacking lineouts in the opposition half, very creative there. So, I think that's it. I mean, I think overall, the things around the scrum, I don't mean to be negative, but it does put us under pressure in test rugby, not scrumming, and not having repeated scrums, or players knowing they can just take a scrum down to the ground, and it's going to be a free kick if they're under pressure. That does hurt us in test rugby, but you got to try something, so they're trying, and some things work, some things don't.
Well, Scott, related to that, you were on an interview the other day on Flow Rugby, sharing your thoughts on some of the new MLR law trials. And I think one of the areas that you talked about, and you mentioned it there, just potentially hurting us at the international stage, is reducing the scrum or those like high pressure moments that can turn a game, or if a team has a real advantage in the scrum, they can turn the screws on the other team and really start to dominate and control things.
Yeah.
Is that what you're alluding to when you say this could potentially be hurting the men's Eagles because they're not getting those pressure moments that's being released in MLR, not preparing them for the international stage?
Yeah, exactly. There's in an international game, there's a little more gamesmanship. You might take a fade in the front row and then come back, or so without the ability to call a scrum from a penalty or the number of resets being changed. Now, even in international rugby, people are impatient, and so there's going to be a penalty blown, right? They're not going to do 4 or 5 resets. The referee, the TMO is going to come in, and the referee is going to come in, but I think that we kind of have a saying that every set piece is game defining in test rugby. And the example I think I used to Philip the other night is one that I have seen before, is you fight your guts out on a maul, maybe you're penalized, you have to maul again, defend your own line. Then the next one, you have a positive moment and you turn the ball over and you get a scrum. And now you have to scrum with your back to your own line, and you have to exit. And that is pressure. Mm-hmm. And, and teams know how to use that pressure. And so with that pressure being relieved, I think it's more than physical. It's a performance focus. It's a mental strain on players. That comes from that style of the game that they're just missing. So we're having really good conversations with forwards and scrum coaches around the league right now around getting the right scrum load, getting the density right in the training environment. If we're not going to get it in games, then we've got to get our players to get it some other way, because we're all just trying to win. So and those coaches got to win in the MLR, and we've got to win in test rugby.
A couple of weeks ago, Bill and I, we had David Wilkinson, who's the head of officiating for MLR, on the podcast to kind of just talk through the idea behind these trials and some of the reasons cited by MLR and World Rugby for these law trials, and in other competitions around the world. More ball in play, speeding up the pace of the game, things like that. Now, this is just my personal opinion here. but it seems like there have been quite a few games in MLR this year where there have been multiple stoppage of play because the TMO is looking at something from a few phases ago. Now, Scott, I don't want to get you in trouble here, but to me, that seems like a bigger issue, slowing the game for a couple of minutes to look a few phases back at a potentially ticky-tacky situation that's slowing the game down. Care to comment on it if there's something that needs to be addressed around maybe too much TMO getting involved in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the TMO turnaround time during the Six Nations was about 110 seconds. So less than 2 minutes on a TMO call. I'd say it's probably a bit longer than that. And the MLR, I'm not tracking that one, but I think there's two parts to this. One is, it does happen in the global game. They are going back. I think it's something that has to be looked at in the game. There's a reason why in NFL that there's a flag thrown or the play happens and it's close and they say this play is under review, right? But if the referee doesn't see a hold, the hold didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, they don't go back and watch the plays and go back. Actually, you know what? There was a penalty on that last play. And there's a reason behind that because it keeps the game going. So I think that whole construct probably, if you want the game to go faster, needs not just an MLR, but globally, we need to really review that, if that makes sense. Because there were tries scored, kicks converted, and they came back in Six Nations games. It's not just MLR. Mm-hmm. So I think I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is because of the nature of our sport and where the officials are, we're tied to radios, and radios are interfered with everything else that has a signal in the stadium. And so at every level, there's technology issues. There's a reason why our sports have a hard wire and the referee goes under the hood in the NFL. Why the head coach is walking around with a cord behind him. It's because they don't want technology to mess with the flow of the game, right? They want the communication to work. So I think there's a lot of things that come into it, and the more you try to interact and you bring that risk into the equation, the more you risk the product that the audience sees on the broadcast, if that makes sense. And so. Mm-hmm. So I think some of those things are like going back. I think some of those are technology issues. I think you just have to look at it as a holistic picture.
And Scott, staying on the topic of reviews, but taking a complete U-turn, I want to go back to speaking about Anthem. And I know you've been super influential in this whole Anthem project, and I'm a Free Jacks man, but I'm always waving the Anthem flag behind my back as well. I love that team, and they've come up very short against DC and Miami. They almost took the club's first win. For you, and looking at the learnings from last year, what's impressed you the most about this Anthem side this year? And I guess what were the changes made that's made them, I guess, have a lot better product on the field this year for fans to see?
I think that just the rate of improvement, particularly, they've got 25% of the roster is first-year pros.
Yep.
And, there's something to be said for that with a league that's improving and new players coming in. So I think the rate at some of those players are competing are quite is positive. It's a positive outlook for what's potentially there for those players to continue on the MLR, whether it's with the Anthem or somewhere else. I think the thing that I've tried to work with the Anthem team on is this idea of the process will get the result in the end, and taking some moves that we made there is putting some coaches in roles that are focused on individual player development and are not tied. Their mood is not tied to the wins and losses of the team for those particular coaches. It's tied to whether the player develops or not. that's how their metrics. That's how I rate those coaches in that environment. Is not by W's and L's. Alama and Kuka are rated by W's and L's and how the team performs, but there's coaches in the environment that are purely rated on the improvement of the players. And so that is just a work in process, because we're still learning. We're still putting people in positions to grow that are executing that process, and so they're growing. So it's fun to be involved but not involved, if that makes sense. So I'm involved in that. We're defining the process because we use it in the pathways and in the age grades, and that process is something that the Anthem provides an incubator for us to get, that we can go use on the U20s and the U23s and U18s. So that part's really good, but not involved, meaning not on the day-to-day, not talking about the tactical for that week, not on the grass, just really kind of standing back and measuring governing the process, so to speak, looking at the governance of it.
Are you giving any sort of, I guess, guidance on the types of combinations that you want to see at Anthem that, eventually hopefully will turn into an Eagles combination down the line? Do you have much say in that process?
I do, yeah. So that's a nice part of it is, we can, it feels good as a national team staff just to be able to say, you're going to play this guy this weekend or you're not. This is the combination. This is the plan for him. He's going to need to rest. I mean, there's a group of guys in there that I've got an eye on July and August for. And so, being able to say, hey, look, let's watch his load. Let's watch his collisions. Let's watch him and his development and make sure he's available for prime time in July and August. I think that's quite good. And it puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff, right? Because you've got somebody from the outside saying, play, not play. It's like having a really bad owner that just tinkers in your squad all the time, but they're good about it, and some really collaborative conversations with Alama and the crew there about that.
That's great to hear. And speaking of, I guess, a new combination that we could see form, or a new inclusion to this Anthem side, is Anthem picked up Toby Fricker. I'm in his fan club, number one fan of Toby Fricker. I know that's been the inner workings of Tom Kindly there. And tell us about, I guess, Toby and what you want to see from him at Anthem. Is that a case of them needing another fullback, or how did he appear back in MLR?
I think Toby was at Bristol and was getting some game time and is an injury cover. The Prem is really locked down on what they call EQP, English qualified players. By him being capped, he's no longer EQP, so he knew his minutes were going to be limited to certain games. And so, I think there was an impetus from Toby's side to try and get game time minutes and to come back to the MLR. So I think that was maybe what was the driver. If he was playing every week, I would have said stay in the Prem, and come back. But because of that, he was struggling to get game time. So, what I'd like to see is Mitchie Boy is there and Connor there, and that's and Storty as a 13. The connection between 13 and the back three is big. So I think from an Eagles perspective, that part's nice to start to build that cohesion. Also very young in the 9-10 position there, so they need some senior leadership in the backs. Some voices in the room and some mentors, and Toby's got plenty of that.
It breaks me. You won't be a free jack, but I'll let you have him.
Wheels, did you have to sign off? Did you have to sign off on that transaction?
Yeah. Final say. He'll do great things there. He's a wonderful bloke. Yeah.
No, TK and Mark sounds like they found a way to make it work. So I'm glad for both of them and for Toby.
Scott, speaking of Eric's story, this could be a good segue to talk a little bit about college rugby. Of course, Eric was first overall pick in the 2024 MLR Collegiate Draft. Having a strong season with Anthem. It helped that as you mentioned, he was already in the U.S. camp. But I guess generally speaking, what have you seen from high-level college rugby these past few years as more players are taking that pathway from college rugby into now wanting to become a professional player in MLR and then further up?
Yeah, I think you've seen a change in the last couple of years from when it was like, I'm not sure if I really want to go do that. The league was emerging to this is what I want to do. And, and I think that's a plus for a subset of those players. I think we're seeing a bit of a really interesting trend right now in that UCLA just beat St. Mary's, Cal Poly just knocked off Army on the weekend, right? So now you're seeing that there's starting to be more parity. It's not a foregone conclusion that 3 teams are going to beat everybody by 100 points every week, and they're going to be vying for the natty. So I think that piece of it is driving some competitive nature because players are looking at these teams and going, are they producing pros? And are they producing Eagles? And St. Mary's is producing pros and Eagles, at the moment. And so I don't know if that's an answer to your question. I think the gap is still very big. And to that end, that's why I spend a good portion of my time with one-on-ones with collegiate coaches. And helping them prepare players and their environments to get them to the next level. Because I think the quality of player really, Eric is an anomaly. He's a special talent for his age. But we need to produce 30 Eric Storties every year in the draft for this to really take off.
I will say, quick comment on the college game. I was on Navy's campus this past fall for Navy versus Army, and great atmosphere. It was a packed place. The weather was fantastic, and it was a good display of rugby. And it felt very different from my club college rugby days when we maybe had 24 people show up. So anyway, so my question there, as we talk about, the quality of competition going up, whether that's players, referees, coaching staff. I guess if a college rugby player is listening to this and wants to play an MLR, wants a shot, be a men's Eagle. I mean, what would you tell them? And this may be hard based on position, but overall, what would you tell them about how can you improve your game to get to that next level?
Yeah, it's the nature versus nurture, or nature and nurture, if you will, right? So if I always kind of draw this, like, have you ever seen like a 2x2 matrix, right? Like 4 quadrants, right? And I say, across the x-axis is your training environment and your competitive schedule. So this is, not very competitive environment to very competitive on the right. And then athleticism is on the y-axis. So your anthropometry, are you big enough? Are you fast enough? Things that God gave you and nobody else can. So if you do that, I say the players that are in the upper right have the highest probability of projection. The players that are in the upper left, meaning you're a very good athlete or you're instinctual around the game, but you're in an environment that is not going to progress you when you come out of the U20s in your 21 to 23 years, then you should be thinking about moving yourself to the right. And that's a very hard conversation because we don't, there's a lot of really great people in the sport, but it is reality. The best environments do produce the best players and the best teams. And, I think Wheels, we can say the Free Jacks and what Scott did there in his time and the detail and the accountability and the players that they produced and the teams and championships that they produced is a result of that process that's there in that environment. So that's first and foremost what I would say is it is a professional game now, and you have to be. That's why players go to Alabama, they go to Georgia, they go to Michigan for football. It's just, you go play with the best and compete with the best and train in the best environment. It's a harsh reality.
Let's got a couple more questions before we let you go here. I did want to touch on AJ McGinty. Will he be available this summer? Back from form, back from slight little injury. Can we anticipate AJ being back wearing that 10 jersey this summer?
He will be back. He will be back. Even if we have to wheel him out there in a wheelchair, he will be back.
Hopefully that's not the case, but that's good to hear.
Yeah, no, he'll be there.
I think that sport's called Murder Ball. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It's pretty good.
Nah, he's progressing well. He should be coming back from that after the Prem break here, and he's excited. And his leadership, especially around the attack, for us is wonderful. And he continues to live what we call Ego 365, which he mentors a lot of the younger American players that are playing over here. He does calls with them. He reviews some of their game stuff for them, and he's completely committed. We're grateful to have him.
And Scott, you mentioned at the top of the show how the world is a bit of a crazy place, and you find your soothing haven listening to Christian music in your garage, pumping some tin. But one of the things, I guess, that makes the world a crazy place is the use of social media and technology these days being such a distraction. But what I do like about you, Scott, is that you use social media in a wonderful way. And I don't know if we can call LinkedIn social media, but I'm an avid follower of you on those profiles, and the reports that you put out on a regular basis for fans in the USA rugby community to engage on have been super awesome to see. And is that a concerted effort from you just to really want to engage with the US rugby community, or just give them some transparency on what you're trying to achieve?
I think it's a little bit of both. For me, I only use social media as a professional outlet. For me, LinkedIn is a professional outfit. It has a purpose. It has a purpose for me, and it's a professional one. And originally, it was just I've been working in data and for 20 some years before I finally got to retire from that and go into coaching full time. And so a little bit of it was just like, hey, let me just throw some stuff out here and see what conversation I get from some other rugby nerds around the world in a professional way. And then I, got some feedback, and people said, we really like what you're sharing about what you're doing. And I thought, well, what has been the biggest criticism of what we've done in our high performance group is our transparency. So why not be transparent? I remember a thing with Wayne Smith a long time ago, and he said, I can give you my playbook, but you don't have All Blacks.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's kind of like, the stuff that I do, I don't get concerned about transparency. It's like, I can share whatever. And I wish I got a little more feedback from rugby nerds. I got a couple of grad students, which are in the sports analytics that we've now put to work from it, doing some other stuff for us. But yeah, it's more just a genuine curiosity, and I just kind of like think, I wonder if that's really the case. Am I just biased on this? So let me start with the question, and then we still go find the data and try to get as objective opinion as we can on it, or objective amount of data, and just chuck it out there. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I'm patiently waiting your next one, so please don't take too long.
Yeah. I put some stuff out this week because I thought I was reading some stuff on some what's called red teaming, some stuff we used to do before, and it's like, how do you create a team of people that's basically trying to break your plan? And so one of the things that we look, as usual, if you open up, if you ever want to fall asleep at night with drool, like, go find something that documents every bias that you have, right? It's like, it's like a book this thick now of biases. They're just making up new ones, right, at this point. So I started to say, like, think about referees a little bit. And I thought, I had all these conversations, and referee would say, yeah, I blew that guy in your game. He's been doing that for years in league play, right? And I thought, well, there's got to be. Is there a correlation between familiarity and penalties? Do you know that a player has particular? I mean, it's human nature to know they have tendencies if you're reffing them, right? So, does that have any? What kind of outcomes does that possibly drive? So, that was our latest question that we posed on. Is like, what is the relationship? There's been a high amount of foul play in the MLR this year. So, okay, where's it coming from? Is it coming from, I want to know, is it coming from the American boys? Because if it is, I want to have a conversation about that, right? So that's part of some of the stuff we looked into. And we looked at our American players per minute more heavily penalized than other players. And then why is that? Because then that question leads to more questions and hopefully to some things that we can help the players perform better with.
Amazing insight.
Well, Scott, as always, we could go on for another hour. I know you've got stuff to do. It's getting late here. Scott, we always appreciate you taking the time to come on our show. I don't think you've turned down our invitation, at least not yet. So we appreciate you always coming back and answering our questions. And it always gets me and Bill and Wheels here thinking about things a little bit differently. So, Scott, appreciate your time, and we'll have to catch back up with you before July or before PNC starts here at the end of the summer.
Yeah, no, that's great. As you can guess, I don't get invited to a lot of parties, so anytime I've been invited somewhere, I say yes.
We just got to have a party full of rugby nerds, and we'll figure it all out. We'll have Christian music. We'll have some data talk. It'll be a good old time.
That's right. We'll slam Diet Cokes. It'll be awesome. Yeah.
Thanks again, Scott. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Scott.
All righty, Wheels. That was, like I said at the end there, I always come out of a conversation with Scott learning something new or thinking about things in a little bit of a different way, which, I think is kind of refreshing for a rugby coach. I don't know, Wheels. What did you think? What was your biggest takeaway coming out of the interview?
No, I feel like it's kind of like when you restart a computer. I feel like my brain's just been restarted. Just the way he speaks about things and the methodical approach and the way he analyzes the game and looks after his players, the methodicalness around it is just super impressive. And, I remember when Scott was appointed to the job, absolutely the right decision to make. And I'm just so pumped to see where the Eagles can go over the next few years, so a couple of years before the Australian World Cup and then the one on home soil. But such a great leader for this American team. And he's definitely got some jokes cracked as well. We got some jokes out of him as well, which I loved.
It's always good. It's always good. Wheels, big matchups this week in MLR. Will you be working a sideline on a game this weekend?
Yeah, I'll be down in your neck of the woods again, Fitzy. I've been the past 3 out of 4 weekends. I've been down at the Maryland Soccerplex here, the home of Old Glory DC, which I know is your team. I believe you support them.
That's correct.
So I'm praying that the wind stays away. The last 2 weekends have been slightly miserable, but I haven't checked the forecast. But
that San Diego game was brutal.
Yeah, that was a Boston standard day. So it's a huge match. I mean, Free Jacks, DC, Eastern Conference rivals, and Free Jacks coming off that tight win over NOLA, DC tight loss to Chicago. So both teams will really want to continue on that good trend, and hopefully a good crowd comes out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those listening, you can catch that game on ESPN Plus. That's Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. Wheels will be on the sideline asking all the great questions. Wheels, want to thank you for agreeing to jump on and be a guest host while Bill is off doing whatever Bill is doing. Bill's fine. He'll be back here in a little bit. But Wheels, man, appreciate you jumping on, and I hope you appreciated your jingle. We'll have to send you the file.
Mate, I want that MP3 file right after this interview, mate. That was world class. It may even be my new ringtone for my phone. So thanks very much, Producer Bill.
Good stuff. Well, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of US Rugby Happy Hour Live. Catch us back here next week when we may have another guest host, and another guest talking all things Major League Rugby, USA Rugby, and you name it. Until next week.